Hello, it's Rhett Nelson with EastIdahoNews.com. We are in studio today with Terri Pickens Manweiler. She is a Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor on the campaign trail in Idaho Falls today, so we're glad to have you in the studio. Terri is Eastern Idaho native. She grew up in Pocatello, went to the University of Southern California and the University of Idaho College of Law. You're also the founding partner in Pickens Law. You and your husband, Mark, have 2 children where you currently live in Boise.
Yep, we do. Yep, my 2 kiddos and I, and got a great son and a great daughter. Both great kids, happy to be on the campaign trail. I've got a 12-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter. So.
Okay, well, very fun. Well, we're glad to have you with us today. Terri, first of all, let's talk about, you announced your candidacy in August.
I did.
Just as you've been a little bit throughout the state since you've started, how has the reception been from people as you've met them?
I've been very pleased with the reception I've received all throughout Idaho. I'll tell you what, I've done pretty much all of southern Idaho so far, and I started here in eastern Idaho because that's where I'm born and raised, and I have a very strong connection to eastern Idaho. So I wanted to start here, and the reception that I received was surprisingly well taken. And when I say surprising, because I'm running as a Democrat. And
in a very conservative state.
In a very conservative state. Eastern Idaho is also very conservative. I grew up in a family of Republicans. I was a Republican for the longest time. And I actually switched parties in 2016. And I thought that I would be challenged a little more because of that reaffiliation. But I have received absolute warm reception. People across Idaho I have always known have been great people. They care about Idaho and they care about people. I'm a 4th generation Idahoan, and so I haven't had the pushback that I was warned about, which has been great.
Yeah, I'm interested in that because your family's Republican. So why did you switch? Why did you become Democrat?
It's a very good question. I think the real main reason, and it was 2016, it was because my ideology, the way that I saw the world, the issues that mattered to me, I really felt like those issues weren't being addressed by the Idaho Republican Party, frankly. You know, at that point, I had 2 kids in public education. I still do have 2 kids in public education, and that's a really big, important issue for me. And it's been largely ignored for my kids' entire history in school in Idaho. So I thought that was a really big reason. Just fundamentally, we disagree with how education should be funded in Idaho, and that was one of the big reasons. There are a couple of other reasons. Mainly, I switched parties because of the hostilities and how far right Idaho has become. And I really wanted to bring people back to the middle, back to the table where I'm used to sitting. I always considered myself to be a very moderate Republican, and I genuinely believe that Idaho is mostly made up of moderate Republicans. And I feel like we've been disenfranchised. I feel like that we have had the last 5 years or so not had our voices as moderates heard. And the only way for me to get my message out and to really start to see a difference and a change in Idaho was to switch to the Democratic Party. And I, like I said, have had great and warm reception. People understand why I switched. You know, I make the joke, I didn't leave the Republican Party in Idaho, the Idaho Republican Party left me.
So first of all, I'm glad to hear that you're getting good reception. There's a certain percentage of the population who might be reluctant to vote for anyone who doesn't have an R in front of their name. So for those voters, if there's any voters like that in Idaho, in eastern Idaho, what would you say to those people? Why should they vote for you?
I would say that right now I am the right choice for Idaho. And when I say that, I don't say that lightly, and I don't say that just because I'm on the campaign trail. I say that because it's the truth. You know, right now we're at a situation in Idaho where our dialogue has all but stalled on actual governance. You know, we elect our leaders to govern the state and to govern and do what the people ask them to do. And they're not responding. Our Idaho legislators, our present lieutenant governor, and to some regard, even our governor, they're not listening to what the people actually care about and what the people actually need in Idaho. And for me to start having conversations with those among us who felt the disenfranchisement, that feel our voices aren't being heard, I'm going to offer them a different choice. And I believe the right choice for Idaho. The reason that you would want to vote for me as opposed to whichever one of the opponents I may be running against is because I genuinely care about Idaho. I genuinely care about the well-being of our kids, about the well-being of our seniors, about the well-being of anybody who has had any struggle with their medical care this last couple of years with COVID. I genuinely care. And I want to talk about that. I want to talk about solutions to problems. I don't want to talk about things that aren't really issues in Idaho. I think we really need to come back to the table. And once you start talking with people, when they might be on the fence, where they might be a straight ticket R voter, if you give them an option that is a little bit different than what they're used to, but is still a safe bet, they're going to take it. And with me, I think I'm their safe bet. I'm not trying to change the world. I'm not even trying to change Idaho. I love Idaho. Idaho is where I was born and raised. Idaho is where I'm raising my children, and I'm raising them here by choice. I'm a fourth generation, like I said. We want to be here. And I'm not someone who's going to come in and, rock the boat. But we've gotten so far to the right that we're off balance. And I can restore that balance. And I really think that people will believe that. And that's why I'm doing it.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting into some more stuff with you. I want to talk about some of those issues that are important to you, the things you're passionate about. I do want to start, though, let's give voters a chance to get to know who you are a little bit. If you don't mind talking about your childhood. You mentioned you're a fourth-generation Idahoan.
I am.
Born and raised in Pocatello. What did your mom and dad? Tell me about your upbringing. Your mom and dad, what did they do for a living? What was home life like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, traditional Idaho family, actually. Born and raised in Pocatello. I was educated in the public education system in Pocatello. I was a Highland Ram, go Rams. And when I was going to school, we had a public education system that was fantastic. My parents didn't have to worry about me getting a solid education. They knew I was getting one. My dad was a general contractor. He was, still is, quite the handyman. My whole life, he worked construction. My mom was a bookkeeper. And fun fact about my mom, I was actually the first person in my family to graduate from college. My mom got her degree about 4 years after I got mine. So once I was out of school, my mom took the opportunity to get into Idaho State University and then move on to get her undergraduate degree as well. So like I said, we're a traditional family. One of the things that we loved to do as a family, every weekend, Eastern Idaho kids, we would drive up to Island Park and we would go camping in Island Park. I absolutely loved the drive. We'd come through Idaho Falls. I always knew I was almost there when you'd see the beautiful Tetons, off to your right. And, we rode dirt bikes, we did snowmobiles in the wintertime. We weren't made of money. We, tried to live within our means. And so I never had I didn't have an upbringing of luxury, but I had an upbringing that was safe. And I had an upbringing that afforded me every opportunity. One of the reasons I say go Rams is because I ran track in high school, and that's what got me recognized to go to college. It would have never occurred to me that, triple jumping and long jumping of all things would get me recognized by a Pac-12 school. At that time it was Pac-10, but now it's Pac-12. And I got the amazing experience of getting to go down to Los Angeles and run track with elite athletes and go to the University of Southern California. It was great for a couple of reasons. One, because I got to see a world outside of the world I was born and raised in, but it also gave me something I didn't have before, and that was perspective. And the perspective is that I really do love Idaho. There are a great many things about Southern California. The beaches, for one, are amazing. And when you are born and raised in snow plowing your car to get out to go to school in the mornings, sitting on a beach on the weekends was, pretty appealing. But I came back. And I came back because that perspective that I mentioned really is that once you're born and raised in Idaho and you're living in the outdoors here, you hunt, you fish, the things that we really truly value in Idaho, they're just here. And we knew, I learned that, when I was away for that 4 years, how much I missed it. and how much I wanted my children to have that same experience. Yeah, I could have stayed in the big city. I could have become a Southern California girl and done all of the warm weather stuff for eternity, but that wasn't who I was. That wasn't who I was brought up to be, and it wasn't who I wanted my children to be. I wanted my children to, white water raft the same rapids I did. I wanted them to have the opportunity to hunt the same areas I did and learn how to fish and throw a fly rod. Those are the things that I learned really mattered to me, that I wouldn't have known had I not gone away to school.
So you mentioned a lot of things there. You were first in your family to go to college.
Yes.
And you have a great love for the outdoors and everything in Idaho that so many other people love.
Yes.
The recreation, the fishing, the hunting, all of that. So does any of that apply to your platform as a candidate?
I would say everything does, and for a great many reasons. The first one is the public education. When I was in Highland High, I took the AP classes. I did everything that we're supposed to do to be able to go to college, but it never occurred to me that I could go somewhere really big and succeed. What my public education provided me was a platform for success. I did not struggle in college. I didn't struggle to be a good learner. I didn't struggle with anything with academics, and that was because of the foundation that I got with a public education in Idaho. I am worried that my children aren't going to have that same foundation, because the only thing that has happened since my daughter was born in 2004, in 2006, you really saw a shift with the Idaho Republican Party shifting how they fund education. They went from, the general fund funding, which is what the Idaho Constitution requires, to requiring counties and cities to pass levies to fund their education and fund their schools. And that just doesn't work for rural Idaho. It might work for, the bigger schools in Boise. It might work for, the bigger schools. It might work for Highland nowadays. But it doesn't work for, Rupert. It doesn't work for the smaller schools like in Lemhi County, because you have a real problem when your funding for education is coming through levies, because those are really difficult to pass. What we should be doing, what the government should be doing in Idaho, the legislators, they should be funding education. And so that's a really big platform issue for me, because my children don't have the assurance that I had. And so I worry about that. Public lands is a big one too. I came back to Idaho because I love Idaho. I have lived what I call the three corners of the state, the triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Born and raised in eastern Idaho. I went to law school in North Idaho, so I've lived up in North Idaho and had quite a bit of time and experience exploring North Idaho. And now I live in Boise, which is, the western Idaho. So I've literally seen everything in between. And I've had the luxury of, learning to fly fish on Henry Swarka the Snake. I've learned to water ski in American Falls Reservoir. I learned to hunt just outside of Arco. These are the things that I never thought I'd have to be worried about losing. But the current idea that Idaho would be trying to get rid of its public lands is a fright to me, because the things that I love about Idaho might be on the chopping block. And the thing that makes Idaho, Idaho, we're 62% public lands in this state. 62% of this beautiful state are public lands. And we can't afford to lose that. There's just no way under my watch as a lieutenant governor sitting on the land board that I wouldn't be able to say out loud, enough's enough. We need to protect and preserve this, not just for me and for my kids, but for my kids' kids and for every generation after us, because what makes Idaho great is our ability to get in our car and travel 1 hour any direction and be in an amazing area where we can recreate, where we can breathe clean air, where we can see just the most beautiful scenery in the world, where we can hunt wildlife that we just assume is always going to be there. But if that's privatized, those rights of ours, they go away.
As an attorney, how does that prepare you to be able to solve some of these education concerns, land concerns, all of these things you mentioned?
I have been a trial lawyer the entire time I've been a lawyer, so almost 23 years as a trial lawyer. The skill of advocacy is really important. If you're going to have a platform and you're going to have people respect your voice and hear what you have to say, you have to know how to say it. And I think the skills and training that I've received as a lawyer have been invaluable. Second to that, however, is I know the law. And, we have a lot of legislators that aren't attorneys, and they're drafting our laws, and that's fine. That's a representation of the general public. That is what a democracy is the general public are elected to make the laws. But as a lawyer, I know how those laws can be applied. I know some of them that work and some of them that don't work. And I think I'm at an advantage when I come into this position, because while I won't be in a position to be vetoing bills, I'll certainly be sitting at the desk across from the governor saying, hey, maybe let's consider this. Maybe let's not do this because of this. And what I'm using for an example is Idaho in the last about 5 years has paid an exorbitant amount of money on attorney fees on cases that the legislation has been challenged and Idaho has lost. So, to short circuit it, the Idaho legislators have passed a numerous amount of unconstitutional legislation. And they've done a great disservice to Idahoan taxpayers, because the taxpayers are the ones that are paying the bill for the attorneys to fight these and for the state to lose. Now, if you have a lawyer at the table who can say, hey, the applicability of this law probably isn't so good, we might be better served, because then we saved all the attorney fees and all the strife for poor Idaho taxpayers who are really tired of footing the bill.
Let's talk about some of the things that have happened over the last year in Idaho. We're coming off of the longest legislative session in the state's history, as we are beginning another one for 2022. You have any comments about that specifically?
I do. And getting back to, when I say the Republican Party left me, talking about disenfranchising voters, we're tired of paying for nothing to happen. To have the longest legislative session in the history of Idaho is really telling. And when you analyze the whole situation with the legislature going on that long, you have to think about, why did they do it? And they did it because we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This is not new to Idaho, new to the country. It's a global pandemic. And they were really caught up in hot button issues that I genuinely believe were really more re-election issues. We saw a lot of political theater come out of the last legislative session. The issues that were addressed did not become law in the final days of the last end of the legislative session. So you have to ask yourself, was it worth it for Idaho taxpayers to have to endure that? And the answer is absolutely not. The challenge that we have is we have the same Speaker of the House who has vowed to do just exactly the same thing this year, this legislative session, at what expense? And that's at yours and my taxpayers' expense. And that is not being responsible. That is not being a leader. And that's not what Idahoans want. Idahoans want their elected leaders to go in and attack the issues that are important to Idahoans, pass the legislation, and go home. That's what they want. And that's not what they're getting. I think we're having a little paradigm shift in Idaho where people are starting to see the political theater versus what's actually getting done. And I think that's a real opportunity for people like me to come in and engage in the dialogue, to finally get a seat at the table to say, hey, we could do this better. The fact that they had the longest legislative session in a global pandemic really is telling that they're not really interested in governing. They're interested in staying in the news.
You talked about political theater.
Yes.
Let's go there. I assume you're thinking of the ethics hearing surrounding Priscilla Giddings, the decision by the committee to censor her, to remove her from one of her committee responsibilities after all of the debacle about her releasing the name of an alleged rape victim, sexual assault victim.
Right.
Any comment about that whole situation, how that played out, her behavior during the hearing?
Right. I will say of Representative Giddings, her behavior is indefensible. Idaho needs to be able to trust their elected leaders. The public trust in a system where you have somebody using their platform to hurt and harm Idahoans, particularly one that has made an allegation such as Jane Doe did in this case, is indefensible. The fact that the legislature actually took it up and removed her from her committee posts, I applaud them. I'm glad they did it. While I do believe there was some political theater involved, I think that she created a majority of that political theater. And she did so because not only did she defy the committee that was trying to investigate this ethics claim, she lied to them. She lied to her colleagues. She lied to the state of Idaho. To me, if you don't have the integrity to make it through an ethics investigation, you don't have the integrity or the stature to hold the second seat in the state of Idaho as lieutenant governor.
The relationship between Governor Little and the current lieutenant governor, Janice McGeehan. That's been a contentious relationship, and there's been a couple times over the last year where she has issued executive orders for two specific things while the governor was out of state, and then when the governor came back in the state, those were overruled, of course, by the governor. But comments about that relationship and her behavior?
Absolutely. So when I talk about political theater, that's another one. I believe that Janice McGeehan needs to do better. She is the present lieutenant governor. She is in a position of statesmanship, and she has to be working well with the governor. The governor who is, for the record, of her own political party. And because she has disrespected the role, the office that she holds, that was one of the big reasons I decided this was the office I wanted to run for. Because people don't really give it much thought about the relationship between the lieutenant governor and the governor, because we've never been in this situation before. Even when we had Governor Cecil Andrus and then Lieutenant Governor Butch Otter, the two of them were of different political parties, but they were both gentlemen and statesmen, and they respected each other, and if one of them wanted to do something, they sat down at a table and they talked about it. Where you can't even get the lieutenant governor to sit at the table with the present governor tells you that our politics in Idaho are broken. They're broken because we have allowed the controlling party to go so far in one direction that they're afraid to even work with each other. And that's just not going to make it okay for anybody in Idaho to feel confident that we can get back to governing in a bipartisanship manner when our own leaders who are of the same parties can't get along. What she did in signing her two executive orders were absolutely simply just political theater. It was inappropriate, it was an abuse of power, and she knew better. But she did it because she knew then what we didn't know, and that she was going to challenge him in the Republican primary for governor. And the fact of the matter is, yes, he vetoed or he overrode her executive orders, but we shouldn't have been in a situation in Idaho where that even happened. You think about the one executive order that she signed, put so many school kids at risk. She signed an executive order literally saying that schools could not mandate masks. My children at that time could not be vaccinated. And what she was telling me as a mother, I can't protect my children because my children's school can't impose a mask mandate. The only thing before the vaccines were available that was protecting my children. She didn't think about that. Or maybe she did and she just didn't care. But the fact that she passed an executive order that put my children at risk cannot be understated. She really did that for one reason and one reason only, because she wanted to appeal to her base and she wanted to appeal to the national conversation to have the support to challenge Governor Little. It had nothing to do with helping Idahoans. It had everything to do with helping Janice McGeehan.
If elected, in the event that there's a Republican governor that's also elected, how will you work with a Republican governor to ensure that there's a unified, non-contentious, I guess, bipartisan approach to leading the state of Idaho?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it. And that, the likelihood of that being the situation where there's a Republican governor and I would be, responsible for working with that Republican governor is pretty high. The idea of running for lieutenant governor for me was to restore the statesmanship of the office. And that's really important to me. It's really important to me because if you don't have that respect of your colleagues and your leaders, you lose the public trust and the public respect. For me, it is really important that I sit at the table. I'm happy to share my ideas. If there's a Republican governor, he may not agree with all of my ideas, but at least I have a seat at the table and someone's hearing me out. I won't be that person that angers the governor so much that he won't invite me to the table, because that doesn't do anybody in Idaho any good. We really need to have as many people at the table as possible and having that dialogue, because if you're not having the dialogue, if you're only hearing one side, of course, things aren't going to change. But there are some things in Idaho that do need to change. And I will give Governor Little credit. He understands and appreciates that we need to better fund education. He doesn't have a big enough plan, in my opinion. He's not talking about spending enough money, but we agree on that. And so it will be very easy to sit at the table with someone who understands and appreciates that we have to fund education. For me, it's not about party politics, it's about Idaho politics. It's what matters to Idaho. I wouldn't be doing this if it were just because I wanted to butt heads with whoever's, in a position of leadership. I'm doing this because I believe Idahoans feel like they've been disenfranchised and they've lost their voice. And I am trying to provide an opportunity where those voices that are being muffled out because of all of the extremists over here, they're going to be heard. And I'm going to do it in a respectful manner. It is fundamentally who I am to try to come together and reach solutions. One of the things you also learn as a lawyer is that not all cases go to trial. Most cases settle. And most cases settle because you can find common ground somewhere. And we're not so far apart in Idaho that, you've got the far right and the far left. That really isn't Idaho. Most Idahoans are right here in the middle. We all care about the same things. We care about giving our kids a good education. We care about our public lands. We care about the infrastructure. We don't like the potholes. Those are the property taxes. Those are the things we care about. And it is not difficult to agree on those things. So if we're really talking about getting the governor and the lieutenant governor at the same seat and kind of getting along, it's finding those common ground areas and working through them and going with that. Because what does that do? It helps Idaho.
With the 2022 legislative session just a week in play, anything you'd like to see, any type of legislation you'd like to see passed this session?
Yes. I am disappointed that the first piece of legislation they took up was to try and increase our budget surplus by, cutting taxes for the rich. I appreciate that Idaho, we don't like to tax a lot, and I'm all about not paying taxes, please. Don't get me wrong. I don't want just like everyone else, I don't like writing the check to the tax man. But that being said, you can't be calling yourself a fiscally responsible state if you're not acting fiscally responsible. The pieces of legislation I would like to see passed, I think Governor Little's education budget is a good start. I am not confident that our Idaho legislature in its current form will even entertain his budget. But I would love it if they would, because like I said, that's a good start. Investing just under $500 million in our public education system for what has not been done since, my kids entered the public education system 17 years ago. Yeah, I think it's a really great opportunity for the legislators to make up some ground. It's not going to get us where we need to be. We're still dead last in funding, even with a $500 million investment into our kids. We're still going to be dead last in funding per pupil in Idaho, across the country. So it's a good start, but I'm not wholly confident that our current legislature will do that. I think another really important piece and tenet to that is to try to get that pre-K money back. That $6 million that we could have gotten last year, it'd be really great to get that back. They also need to address funding full-time kindergarten. That would be number one on my list of important things to do, because it's not a mystery that the quicker our kids start learning, the better they are set up down the road in their education and academics. So starting them earlier is really important. Giving them the opportunity to be in school for full day really is giving them a boost that every other state in the country has. That we're disadvantaging our kids by not providing that. The other things I'd like to have the legislators take up, I'd like them to stop the nonsense about appraising and looking into valuing our public lands. I'd like that to just be off the chopping block. The things that I would like them to really focus on, like I said, are let's accept those infrastructure funds for the infrastructure plan that both of our Senators Risch and Crapo, voted for. They voted for those funds. They got funds allocated for Idaho. Our Idaho legislature, it would be great if they'd pass legislation to accept the funds, and they have to. There may be workarounds to get some of those funds, but they really need to, as a legislature, come up with a plan and accept those funds. It'd be great to see them do that.
In regards to just how COVID has been handled in the state of Idaho, it's the most talked about issue. Anything you would have improved there? Are you pleased with the governor's response to that?
I understand and appreciate that Governor Little was caught between a rock and a hard place, because by the time that the pandemic really hit Idaho, it was politicized. And it became a political issue. And it's really, really unfortunate that a global pandemic had political ramifications that trickled down to the state of Idaho. But it did. And I understand and appreciate that he didn't want to impose a bunch of restrictions. He didn't want to do any further of a lockdown than that was necessary. Certainly didn't want to impose a vaccine mandate among Idaho citizens or do anything with mask requirements, and he left it to the municipalities to deal with that. I think that was probably, for him, the best approach. Idaho is a very big state. COVID has hit certain areas harder than others, and I think we've had some really great mayors and city leaders step up and handle the pandemics in their cities and their areas. Do I think he could have done more? Yes. And how I think he could have done more is I think he could have been a better leader insofar as stomping down the idea that COVID was political. I think he, as the leader of the state, had a real opportunity to say, wearing a mask does not make you a Democrat. Wearing a mask does not make you any vulgar word that might be said about somebody who actually just cared about not getting COVID. I appreciate that he was very open about being vaccinated himself. I love the fact that he encouraged people to get vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, my family's vaccinated. It's the way we can protect ourselves, and I appreciate that he did that. From a leadership standpoint, however, I felt like he might have been a little too silent when the very loud minority was speaking up about, mask mandates or anything that would have helped us curb the pandemic early on. We're 2 years in. I mean, at this point, you're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. I really hope and pray that those people that do get it have been vaccinated so they're not putting themselves at risk of prolonged sickness or even death. Because the statistics and the science have shown that if you're vaccinated, you'll probably survive.
What makes you more qualified, a better choice than your opponents for lieutenant governor?
A better choice. So I'll take them one by one. And with Priscilla Giddings, the first word that comes to my mind is integrity. There's no question in my mind that I have the integrity and the statesmanship to be a much more qualified and much more for lack of a better word, efficient use of the office. She would use the office for what her predecessor would use it for, political theater. She is in it for herself. She's not interested in helping Idahoans, and she's not interested in telling the truth. And that's not somebody we want in the second chair of the State House. It's just not. Again, what I said earlier about her, some of the behavior and actions that she has displayed are indefensible. And that's not what a leader has. A leader is not in a position where you can't defend what they've done. I'd like to switch over to Speaker Bedke. You also can't be a leader without courage. And Speaker Scott Bedke has no political courage. And it is not going to be difficult for me to do better than he has done as leader in his own party as Speaker of the House. And I say that because this 300 and some odd day legislative session, he lost control of his own caucus. He lost control of his own party, and he lost control of the House of Representatives. They took over. They were able to get some of the worst legislation passed, much of which is getting challenged, through the courts, and to waste a bunch of taxpayers' money on issues that Idahoans don't care about. He didn't give Idahoans property tax relief. He did not give Idahoans better education. He did not give Idahoans any new infrastructure. He didn't give Idahoans the things that they were asking for him to do. And that's not a leader. You can't lose the leadership of your own caucus in the House of Representatives and then expect to be promoted to the second chair of the state of Idaho. So from a leadership perspective, I have the courage that it's going to take to be a true leader. I have the integrity it's going to take to make sure that I can restore the public trust back in the state. And I've been a small business owner for 15 years. I know what it takes to run a business. I know what it takes to maintain your leadership position, and I know what it takes to make tough decisions. And without the courage to make tough decisions, you're not a leader. And that's where I believe I will be different from Speaker Bedke and most definitely from Representative Giddings.
The primary is May 17th.
Yes.
The general election is November 8th. If people want to learn more about you or your platform, where can they find you on social media and online?
I'm very easy to follow. It's terriforidaho.com. So Terri, Terri, for FOR, Idaho.com. All my social media is listed on my website, and it's all the same, terriforidaho.com.
Well, Terri, thanks again. It's been a great conversation. We, of course, will have an article below this video at eastidahonews.com. I'm Rhett Nelson. Thanks for watching.